morning. Good morning. All right. Well, hopefully you took the time to write down your goals, your gratitude, set your intentions for the day. Great opportunity to do that and get centered. So great job on being here. You know, the last couple of morning ascents really focused on the listing conversation and the process of building value and rapport. But I want to delve a little bit deeper into that. And the reason is this, because look, gang, what I know after being in the business for 30 years is that our number one way of getting more business in real estate, excuse me, is by reaching out to people proactively, communicating with people. And the better we are at the skill of doing that, the better results that we get. And so I'm always going to make sure that we're focusing on the things that are highest impact and to give you the best chance possible of being successful in the business and achieving your goals. And so I want to delve a little bit deeper into the process really of communication and the skills of communicating, some of the specific ones. There are 8 that we're going to go over here today. And I may decide, depending upon how far we get, if we can get through all 8, great. But if we don't, then we'll certainly work on them this week and cover them to the extent that we need to, so that everybody's got a good grasp of it. Because I think, like a first responder, we have got to practice these things over and over again so that we don't think when we do it, we just simply do it. It comes from muscle memory. And when you do it that way, you get much better results. Because the last thing you would want to have happen is a fireman or a police officer, in the case of an emergency, think about, okay, what am I supposed to do next? That would be a disaster. The victim, the potential victim, would be in all sorts of trouble if the fireman or the police officer didn't know what to do next and had to check a manual. So we need to make certain that we know what to do next, and we're actually engaged in the situation and can, through muscle memory, because of practice, just simply do the job effectively, where we build rapport and we build value so that people choose us versus the competition. Because really, ultimately, that's what it's about. It's about getting them, the potential clients or your past clients, to choose you or to choose you again versus the thousands of choices that they have. All right. So there are 8 things. I want you to write down these 8 words, and then we'll get through as many of them as possible. First one is this: questions. Number 1, questions. Number 2 is listen. Number 3 is repeat and affirm. Number 4 is transitional statements. Transitional statements. And then number 5, tie downs, TIE downs, DOWNS, tie downs. And then number 6, mirror and match. Number 7, sound bites. And then number 8, close. So those are the 8. Those are the 8 that we're going to cover. So let's start first of all. And if you didn't get that, just let me know and I'll repeat it. But also remember that this is recorded, and I would certainly recommend that everybody go back and watch this over and over again. All right. Anybody need me to repeat that? If you do, give me a high sign in the chat box or say something. But good? Okay, I'm going to take silence as
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat
I'll do
those?
it, dude. You bet. Yeah, so number 1 was questions. Number 2 is listen. Number 3 is repeat and affirm. That's repeat and affirm. That's number 3. Number 4 is transitional statements. Transitional statements. Number 5 is tie down, TIE, DOWN, tie down. And then number 6 is mirror and match. Number 7 is soundbite. And number 8 is close. Close. Got it?
Thanks, John.
You bet. Absolutely. You bet. Okay. So number 1, questions. Gang, just a few comments here. Remember this: the person who asks questions is in control of the conversation. And what I find is that most real estate agents go into a listing conversation or into a buyer broker conversation where they want the client, potential client, to sign an agreement, that the client has all the questions. And so then the agent thinks that they have to do all of the talking. And that may seem like the right thing to do. Well, gosh, if they have questions, I need to answer them. Well, the problem with that is this, that you're allowing somebody who is not familiar with the process, nor familiar with what really creates a great conversation where rapport is built and value is built, especially in a business setting, you're allowing that person to take control of the situation. You're allowing them to hijack what should be your conversation, the conversation led by you, to help them ultimately feel safe and comfortable or confident in choosing you versus the competition. So number one is just make certain, gang, that as you're having conversations with people, whether it's the listing conversation, the buyer broker conversation, or your prospecting, whether it's over the phone or doors, that you already have a series of questions that you already know that you're going to ask. The problem is, for most real estate agents, they ad lib, they do it on the fly. And what I've heard over the years is the number one reason that they do that is because they don't like scripts. They say that scripts are disingenuous. It makes them feel uncomfortable. It doesn't seem like it's normal or natural. And I agree with all of those things if you don't have them memorized and you don't practice on how to deliver them. But if you memorize the phrases, the words, the sentences, the scripts, right, and then practice delivering it, well, then it does become yours. But here's the perspective that I want you to have as it relates to asking, a series of predetermined questions. When you're worried about how you're going to appear by asking questions that you've memorized and are delivering those, what it tells me is that you're more focused on you than you are on them. See, gang, everything that you do on a daily basis is already scripted, right? If you take a look at the way you behave in your life, you behave very habitually. There are things that you do day in and day out the same way every single time. Well, that's basically a script. It may not be a verbal script, but it's a physical script. And the fact is, you have verbal scripts as well that you follow every single day with your spouse or with your children or with your neighbors or strangers that you pass by. You have your phrases that you say over and over and over and over again. And it works for you. So my question is, why wouldn't you leverage that same ability in the business of real estate? We really, in the business of real estate, as leaders, are performers. We have a script, no different than a Hollywood actor or actress has, that we need to learn. And if we learn it and practice how to deliver it, we make a lot more money. See, a Hollywood actor or actress that takes a script and does not memorize it and shows up on the day of the shoot, they're supposed to get filmed, and they don't have their lines memorized. Well, first of all, the director's not happy, the producer's not happy, the rest of the team's not happy. But the bottom line is that they don't perform it in a way that's worthy of it being recorded. And so therefore, everybody has to wait for the actor or actress to memorize the script and to practice delivering the words in a way that it's believable, that people believe that they're actually that person who's saying the words. Listen, I don't care that it's unnatural for you, because what I know is that eventually it will feel natural. I mean, the first time that you swam, that didn't feel natural because you didn't really swim. You probably just about drowned like I did. Or getting on a bike, that didn't feel natural, but eventually it did. There are things in our lives that we did at one point that didn't feel natural, but because we did it over and over again, we practiced it, it felt natural. And having a set of questions or a script that you follow, that you practice, that you internalize, and you practice the way in which you deliver it is no different, gang. And I promise you, if you will make that your focus, to the point of the affirmations, when we talk about the 12 steps to the summit of success, it talks about, I practice and internalize my sales skills for a minimum of 1 hour each day. Are you really doing that? The higher your level of skill, the more likely it is that you will engage in the very activity that you need to generate more business, specifically prospecting, or going out and giving a listing conversation or having a listing conversation and getting great results where, 8 or 9 times out of 10, when you go out and present, you get a contract signed. All right, so probably enough said there, but just, gosh, don't resist having a script. And if you want to know, well, which question should I ask or which script should I follow? Well, you all should have the script book that we provide to every one of the agents within the company. And if you don't have that, or you don't know where it is, and you need another one, just simply ask your manager. The second word is listen. Listen. It's one thing to ask a question, right? And a series of great questions, but if you don't listen, of course, then we don't have a great conversation. Because what is a great conversation? A great conversation is nothing more than a series of questions that then great answers are given for. And our job is to ask those great questions that gets someone the opportunity to basically share their story. See, the number one human need is acceptance or acknowledgement. It's validation. And so if we're asking questions that give people an opportunity to tell their story, then we are going to build rapport. We're going to build a sense of safety and security in that conversation with that person, because everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be acknowledged. Everybody wants to be listened to. So how do you let people know that you're listening? Well, face-to-face, our verbal cues, our physical cues are one of the easiest ways. Eye contact, nodding your head or smiling when somebody's saying something that's fun or interesting. Or if somebody's saying something that isn't fun or interesting, but it's maybe bad or negative news, maybe you're talking to a potential client who said they're getting a divorce. Well, obviously you wouldn't want to nod your head and smile or laugh at that, right? But you might want to look at them and kind of grimace and then follow that up with, oh, I'm so sorry, right? And we do this normally. Again, what I'm saying here, none of you is unaware of these things. The challenge is, what I find is that we all know how to do this in what I would consider to be normal everyday conversations. But then when it comes time to doing this in real estate, somehow we forget what we already do naturally. And I'm here to tell you, what you already know how to do naturally in normal conversations, you need to do the same thing in real estate. But here's why I believe that it happens, that most real estate agents forget to do it, or don't pretend like they don't know how to do it, or assume that somehow it's different in real estate than it is in their normal everyday conversations. It's because they believe that they have to get into presentation mode, that I've got to present to people, and I'm not a really good presenter, and I don't like talking in front of people, and I've never really practiced, my ability to present in front of people. Well, it's not a presentation, gang. It's a conversation, and every one of you knows how to have a great conversation. So have a great conversation. Ask those questions, and when they give the answers, let them know that you are listening. Head nods. When you're face to face with somebody and they're saying something that's interesting or that's important, nod your head up and down like, I get it. Yes, I'm hearing you. The other would be, of course, leaning into them as they're saying something interesting, or if they're saying something that's a surprise, like standing back a bit or sitting back a bit, right? Their verbal cues, of course, are important as well. If they're saying something that's interesting or amazing or difficult, like wow, or really, or nice, or awesome, or fantastic, or ouch, or I'm sorry. In other words, use your words to let them know that you are listening, because the number one human need is acknowledgement or acceptance or validation. These people that you're talking to, make no mistake about it, need to be acknowledged or validated or accepted by you. Yes, you, the person who is there to ask them to sign a contract, to ultimately to ask them to pay tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, they need you to validate them, to acknowledge them. Why? Because they're human beings. And like anybody else, they want to be accepted by everybody, or as many people as possible. And you're no exception to that. So listen is number two. Number three is repeat and affirm. Now, how is that different from listening? Well, it's not really different, other than repeating and affirming is a specific skill that I want you to understand and to practice as it relates to certain verbiage that you would use. Because repeating and affirming is an active way of listening. Well, what is repeating and affirming? We repeat what they said. So if I said to a potential prospect or a potential client, maybe they're an expired, and I ask them if they're planning on putting their home back on the market, and they say, no, we're not going to do that. We're definitely not going to list with an agent. We're going to consider doing something maybe in the summer, maybe list it for sell by owner. Well, when they say that, I want to pay attention to the specific words that they use. And I want to repeat some of those words back to them. Why? Because their words are important. Those were their words. They used them. They matter to them. So if I use some of their words, then they're going to know that I listened to them. And if I listen to them, I'm meeting their number one human need, which is validation or acceptance. And when they feel like I am accepting them or validating them, how do they feel about me? They feel more comfortable. They feel more confident, which means they'll relax some. And they'll take the time to maybe listen to me a little bit longer than they otherwise would. So when they say that to me, I'm going to say, okay, great. So at this point, you're not planning on listening with an agent and you're thinking about doing for sale by owner over the summer. You know what? If I were you, I would feel the same way too. Now that's the affirmation part. If I were you, I would feel the same way too. Now, a lot of agents over the years, gang, have said to me, well, gosh, I don't want to say that because I don't think that they should be listing it or trying to sell it on their own as a for sale by owner. Well, gang, I didn't say that they should. I just said if I were them, I would feel the same way too. My job as a great leader, a great communicator, is to change their perspective, help them see things a little bit differently so they don't say that I'm going to FISBO over the summer. That eventually they say, well, you know what? I see enough value. I feel safe enough in conversation with you. Let's sit down and I want to hear more about how you could actually help me get my home sold this time. It's a very powerful thing when we listen to people, let them know that it's okay for them to have their perspective, but then don't accept that as the final answer. And we continue the conversation to build rapport and to build value so that we can come back to that conversation of having them actually meet with us to consider listing their home this time and actually getting it sold. So the repeat and affirm. You repeat some of their words back to them so that they know that you listen, and then you affirm it. And you affirm it by saying, if I were you, and gang, write this down. If I were you, my gosh, you know what? If I were you, I would feel the same way too. Or if I were you, I would think the same way too. Or if I were you, I would do the same thing too. Okay? It's think, feel, or do. And I change the word depending upon the situation, specifically their personality style. Okay? If they're a driver, I'm going to say do. If they're an amiable, then I'm going to say feel. Or an expressive, I'm going to say feel. If they're an analytical, I'm going to say think. Because analyticals think, or at least they think they think. They also feel, but they certainly identify with thinking. So depending upon the personality style, I'm going to change that word in the affirmation. If I were you, I would feel the same way. If I were you, I would think the same way. Or if I were you, I would do the same thing. All right. And gang, as we're going through this, if you have questions, please take your phone off of mute and ask the questions, all right? Just remember that as it relates to this point with the repeat and affirm, they have a right to feel, think, or do the way they do, right? Our job is to initially acknowledge that right, and then as a great leader or a great communicator, get them to kind of change their perspective, to open their eyes a bit, to see what possibilities there are in letting us lead them through the process. All right.
Amiable, analytical, and what's the one I missed?
Driver.
Oh, driver. Is there a fourth one too?
There is. So we have expressives, amiables, analyticals, and driver.
Okay. And then a driver would be do, amiable would be feel, analytical is think.
Uh-huh. And an expressive would feel as well. It's all right.
Okay, I'm typing it out.
Yeah. No, it's all good. I appreciate the fact that you're doing this, actually. There are others I know who have the same question, so I'm glad you're asking, Glenn. So thank you. Yeah. Okay. All right. The next point is transitional statements. And we're going to finish on this one, gang, and then we'll resume with the other 4 on Wednesday. So a transitional statement. What is a transitional statement? A transitional statement is nothing more than a phrase that allows us to go from one topic to a completely different topic in the same conversation. Okay. So if I were talking to a for sale by owner or an expired, and I had asked them, when they were planning on listing with a real estate agent, and they said that they weren't, that they were going to try to get it sold on their own, or they were going to wait until the summertime if they're an expired before they do anything, I'm going to repeat and affirm that. So you're going to wait until the summertime. You know what? If I were you, I would feel the same way too. There's your repeat and affirm. But then I'm going to move on to a completely different conversation or topic within the conversation by using the transitional statement. I would say, having said that, or now that I understand that, or as important as that is, I would use any of those three phrases. Now that I know that, let me ask you a question. How long have you lived in your home? How did you happen to pick this area? Had your home sold, where were you planning on moving to next? Having said that, what prevented your home from selling, in your opinion? In other words, the original conversation was about them choosing to make an appointment, to agree to a time to meet with me to talk about getting their home listed. Well, they said they're not interested in that. And rather than me trying to convince them in that moment that that's the wrong decision, because I don't have any rapport with them and I haven't represented any value, it's not going to do me any good to close them at that point. I need to build rapport and some value. Then I'm going to use a transitional statement to get off of that topic of let's set an appointment to meet, to just simply building more rapport and also building value in the conversation. So that's why I use the transitional statement. So my response to them is, if I were you, I would, you're thinking about waiting until the summer. If I were you, I would think the same thing too. Having said that, let me ask you, what do you think prevented your home from selling? Now that conversation doesn't have anything to do with us meeting for an appointment. That's a completely different conversation. I want to get his opinion on what he believed prevented his home from selling. Or I could say, you know what? So you want to wait until the summertime. If I were you, I would feel the same way too if I'm talking to an expressive or an amiable. Now that I know that, let me ask you, how did you happen to pick this area? How did you happen to pick your home? Or had your home sold? Where were you planning on moving to next? Gang, it's a very simple thing, but it's very powerful. What I find for most people is that if they get rebuffed or they get rejected or the prospect puts up a wall like, nope, not interested, then they don't know where to take it. And they normally just simply, they lose their confidence and they let the potential client, the prospect go. Well, the transitional statement allows you not to stall, not to stammer, not to and ah, and it allows you to simply transition from that stone wall that the prospect has put up to another area of opportunity where we can continue down a pathway further than we did with the question about meeting to get their home listed and sold. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, what we'll do after we go through the other 4 on Wednesday, then what we'll do is we'll role play a conversation where we incorporate every one of these into the conversation so you can see how it looks all together, where it just kind of just meshes together, dovetails nicely, so you can see how you use these sales skills in a conversation to ultimately to build rapport and to build value so that they choose you versus the competition. Fair enough? Somebody give me a response to that so I know we're on the same page, and we'll wrap it up. All right. Samantha and Brian, thank you so much. Glad you guys joined us this morning. And just very quickly, I saw somebody in the chat line ask a question. Let me get to it and see what it was. Somebody said, you can read the scripts into your voice memo and play them at red lights and bedtime, wake up time. I love it. That's great. Plenty of opportunity during the course of the day to practice your scripts and to become a better communicator. So amen to that, do that. All right, let's finish this up with some closing affirmations. And remember, you want to see the continuation of this, you want to participate in the continuation of this on Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. So be there or be square. Here we go.